The Trump administration is concerned, worried, if you will, about what is to come for the Republican Party in the midterm elections now that we're dealing with higher gas prices. Inflation was already bad and it is set to get worse. So this economic fallout, which is of course the result of the ongoing war against Iran, is gonna have some real political consequences for the Trump administration. At least that's according to a new scoop from the Wall Street Journal. So per the Wall Street Journal, Trump has been privately communicating with members of his administration about how he's increasingly worried, okay, and he should be worried, that his party is about to suffer a shellacking in the midterms. And I think that the shellacking is definitely gonna come, because one thing that Americans absolutely loathe is paying too much for gas. And right now, we're paying too much for gas. It's all due to a war that could have been avoided. It was a war of choice, and it's a war that the American people know has been, launched on behalf of Israel, not in terms of the best benefits or the best interests of the American people. So since the Iran war began, jet fuel prices have doubled. US Airlines spent more than $5 billion on fuel in March, and that's up 30% from a year earlier, according to government data. And that, of course, was something that has already hit Americans when it comes to their summertime travel plan. So if you're trying to book a flight, you're noticing that that flight is a lot more expensive today than it was just a few months ago. So in March, for instance, the price of a US domestic round trip economy ticket rose 21% from just a year earlier to $570, according to Airlines Reporting Corps. And Trump's advisors are eager to end the war. They want to end it as soon as possible. At least that's what the Wall Street Journal is alleging. And they hope that if they end the war as soon as possible, by the time we get closer to the midterms, prices will moderate a little bit. Now, if you listen to economic experts debate this matter, many of them do not believe that prices will moderate by the time we hit midterms. In fact, we're not really suffering the full consequence of how much destruction has been caused to oil and gas infrastructure in the Gulf. And by the time we experience what has already happened in terms of damage to that infrastructure, it'll be around August or September. At least that's what economic experts are alleging. And so Trump's advisors might think if we end the war today, maybe we can still save the Republican Party for the midterms. Number one, the war is not gonna end today. In fact, things unfortunately got worse, and now you're hearing stories about how the US is striking Iran, Iranian ports. Iran is also responding by targeting military vessels, US military vessels near their coast. So it's not a good sign. But Trump's advisors, I don't know if they have any plan, really. It doesn't even matter what Trump's advisors tell him or what they want. It doesn't matter if he's getting the best advice within his administration. The influence of a foreign country on this administration and the decisions that Trump makes in regard to foreign policy is what seems to reign supreme. So former New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who has a name I love to pronounce, fun last name. He's now the president of Airlines for America. It's an industry group for the airline industry. Here's what he's warning. Ticket prices won't go down immediately. You're looking at elevated ticket prices through the summer and fall because it takes a while for the prices to go down. Now, when asked for comment, a White House spokesperson blatantly lied, which we should all expect at this point, and said the following. The president and his entire energy team anticipated these short-term disruptions to the global energy markets from Operation Epic Fury and had a plan prepared to mitigate these disruptions. Really? Really, what was the plan? Because if I remember correctly, and I do remember correctly, President Trump was shocked that the Iranians closed the Strait of Hormuz in response to US attacks. Now, anyone with two brain cells to rub together, anyone who was paying attention to the hostilities between the United States and Iran knew that this is what Iran was threatening to do, and that's exactly what they did. Why are we surprised by that? So the idea that Trump had a plan in place to mitigate the economic consequences of this war is laughable, to say the least. So how do we know it's a lie? Well, one, according to the New York Times, Trump didn't even believe that, they were gonna close the Strait of Hormuz, and they did. And then on top of that, General Kane also flagged the enormous difficulty of securing the Strait of Hormuz and the risks of Iran blocking it. Trump had dismissed that possibility on the assumption that the regime would capitulate before it came to that. They ain't capitulating. I think that's pretty clear. And then on top of that, Trump has admitted that he thought the Iran war would be even worse for energy prices than it has borne out so far. However, Trump decided to go to war anyway, and then you have this clip from just a few weeks ago. Take a look.
I said to my people, they're all gathered, all these wonderful guys, Scott Bessent, the whole group, Howard, they're all doing a good job. I said, fellas, I got a little bad news for you. I'm going to put a little wrinkle in your numbers. Why, sir? We're going down to a place called Iran, and we're going to make sure that they never have a nuclear weapon because they'll use it to blow up, because they're religious fanatics, and they will use that weapon to blow up the world, but they'll start with Israel in the Middle East, and we're not going to let that happen. And they said, wow, that's going to be bad. I said, yeah, it's going to hurt the market, and it's going to drive up the price of oil and whatever it is, but that's peanuts compared to what would happen if we let this happen. And if you would have told me that the Dow is almost, I'm looking at your thing, I mean, literally we're at 50,000. And if you would have told me that oil is at 90, as opposed to 200, I would be frankly surprised.
So in other words, President Trump wants to tell the American people, despite the fact that you're paying a lot more for your summer travel plans, despite the fact that you are paying a lot more just to get to and from work every day because of rising gas prices, you're welcome, America, you're welcome. Isn't he such a great president? You're welcome. It could have been worse. It could have been worse. This is just the price you pay to ensure that Iran doesn't obtain a nuclear weapon, which they weren't pursuing in the first place. So let's hear from actual Americans and what they're going through. So for instance, there are some first responders in Maine who are claiming that surging fuel prices are adding up quickly for fire, EMS, and law enforcement agencies that rely on constant travel.
Don't forget, Noble Mobile is saving you a ton of money. So a lot of people are signing up now and beginning to realize, what the hell, why am I paying so much to Verizon and AT&T? So your bill's only $50 a month, but it can actually be less because they give you money back if you don't use your data. So if you're paying more than $50, there's no reason to not switch. It's crazy not to switch because same phone, same number, same contacts, literally nothing changes. TYT.com/switch, TYT.com/switch. All right, we'll be right back.
Well, I mean, if they need to spend more on fuel, that must mean they need more resources to run their operations, which could mean higher state and local taxes. Congratulations and you're welcome, America. Let's get to other people, including the head of a meal delivery service for seniors in Missouri, who stated, quote, "It's really put a hurt on us, trying to deliver those meals daily. We just can't do it anymore." Well, Pam, sad day for you. But don't you feel so great that our military is carrying out a war on behalf of Israel? Aren't you happy about that? Don't you feel good about it? One more. Let's go to what's happening now that we have Mother's Day coming up. So a florist in Omaha, Nebraska says the following, quote, "The gas has definitely gone up. We do a lot of delivering, probably driving, 200 miles a day. So, delivering the flowers is definitely more expensive. We do have more delivery fees coming from our wholesalers." So in other words, businesses are gonna go under as a result of this, small businesses especially. But it's okay because we're helping Israel fight a war that they desperately wanted us to fight for many decades so they can expand their borders. So you're welcome, America. Trump is doing you a favor. Cenk, your 2 cents.
So look, guys, we've talked a lot about this. Lagging indicators are prices that oil affects, and aluminum and helium and fertilizer affects, because those are among the top commodities that are blocked. And so that pain is coming whether the war is over or not, because It's just a matter of time before it hits you. So if the war is over and your prices go up, you're gonna go, what the hell just happened? I thought the war was over, right? But that's the reverberating consequence of the war. Now,
exactly.
At this point, it doesn't look like it's over. And if it's not over, then the reverberating consequences are not going to be significant waves. They're going to be a tsunami. And so, look, Anna, as we've talked a lot about, this isn't just counterproductive for America. But I guess I'm not sure that I've ever put it this crisply. Like, if that economic tsunami hits America, this country is going to be so furious towards Israel that our relationship will be totally unrecoverable.
The entire globe will be furious toward Israel and the United States, Cenk.
Yeah.
But no, I think the fury toward Israel, though, is only based on anti-Semitism. They can't possibly ever do anything wrong. And so any criticism is it's just our deep-seated hatred for I guess, Jewish people in their minds.
Well, so that's why that victimhood complex, it's feigned by a lot of people, but it's genuine for probably more people, is a giant problem because they think, well, they must hate us because we're Jewish. That's what we've been taught our whole life. So that means we don't have to do any self-reflection. We don't ever have to change course. We're never wrong because everyone who hates us irrationally. And they hate us for something we can't change, our religion and our identity. That's why that lie is so effective. It used to be super effective externally, like, hey, don't say anything against Israel, otherwise you're an anti-Semite. Now it's effective, unfortunately, in the wrong way internally, where Israel supporters, not all Jewish people at all, 63% of Jewish Americans are against the current Israeli government. But folks who support the Israeli government think, no, if your gas prices went up, that's not Israel's fault, that's your fault for being an anti-Semite. And like, that sounds hilarious, right? But they genuinely believe that any criticism, even the slightest ones, is with bad intent. Well, so that's why it can't possibly be their fault.
I don't know if they genuinely believe it.
I think the majority of them do.
Maybe the majority of Israelis have deluded themselves into thinking any criticism toward their country or their government is just based on anti-Semitism. Maybe, I don't know. But in terms of the people in positions of power in Israeli society, no, they know what they're doing. They're totally weaponizing identity in order to silence anyone who disagrees with what they've been pushing the United States to do, not just with this war, but with multiple foreign conflicts.
Yeah, there's no question, Anna. I understand what you're saying. And actually, that's a super interesting dichotomy. I wanted to talk to Peter Beinart a little bit about it. We did a Substack conversation. You should check that out on our Substack page. But we didn't get into it enough. We half got into it. And I want to have it with someone else that is going to have an intellectual conversation about it instead of freaking out, right?
Did he freak out?
No, Peter didn't freak out. Okay. But I want to have a larger one because, guys, what a lot of Jewish Americans don't realize, and not just about people inside Israel, but also here in America, is that they think, well, I'm not any part of any nefarious plot. So there's all this stuff must be like weirdo, super anti-Semitic stuff that I was taught about when I was a kid, right? And from their perspective, I totally get it because they're not part of any nefarious plot at all, right? But their leaders are, and that has never occurred to them. That, hey, maybe I'm not involved, but some super powerful folks on my side are. Now, it's funny because honestly, like almost any other ethnicity and background wouldn't be surprised by that. Why? Not because Jews are particularly X, Y, or Z. No. It's because, like, if you're Turkish, do you know that Turkish leaders could be up to no good even if you're not? Of course you know that, right? So I just fill in the blank for any other group. You know that the guys at the top could be doing things, including Americans, right? We know the guys at the top are the worst of us, right? Not the best of us. But because of the overwhelming propaganda about how, no, the whole world hates us. And it doesn't matter what we do. Everyone hates us. So whenever anyone criticizes you or Israel or anyone else, totally ignore it. And in fact, don't ignore it. Hate that person.
And just,
because that person is attacking you for your identity, right?
Stupid. Yeah, that's so totally stupid.
Yeah, and so
but by the way, these people are not dumb, okay? They're not dumb. So like, it's just common sense. If your government is pressuring and has succeeded in getting the United States to start a war that has already caused harm to the global economy, and it's only gonna get worse. Why would you assume that criticism toward your government is just based on anti-Semitism?
Because it's convenient,
Yeah, because it's convenient, because they weaponize their identity, Cenk. That's what it is.
No, I know. But look, last two things on that. So we all, to some degree, weaponize our identity, and we don't do it purposely. So when you talk to a Turkish person, for example, about the Armenian genocide, 8 out of 10 times they're gonna deny it. Why? Because they were taught, no, everybody's just being against Turks, right? Oh, they think the Turks are barbarians and savages, and that's why they do okay.
Pause. I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. For me, weaponizing identity means getting something substantive out of using your identity to manipulate others. So a perfect example would be, right? I mean, you saw a lot of this actually. I mean, when you look at the DEI era, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, right? You still have, a ton of Black Americans struggling in a lower socioeconomic status, no real effort to systemically lift them up. But the people who weaponized their Black identity tended to be highly privileged and elite Black people to begin with.
Right, that's a perfect analogy, because that goes to point 2 that I was gonna make in this regard.
Yeah.
So the people at the top weaponize it.
Yes.
And so but the people that are in that group have no idea, right? So if you're an average African American, they say, hey, you gotta support this African American politician because we need representation and et cetera, and perspective. That seems totally normal and reasonable to you, right? And so you wanna do that. What you don't know is a lot of those leaders just came up with that as a talking point to get everybody's votes and to shame and guilt others for not voting for them, right? The leaders are perfectly aware of that. I mean, oh my God, in this country, I mean, I can name a lot of names there in that category that are perfectly aware of it. But the followers are, and everybody else in that group isn't.
Yes, I get what you mean now. I totally get what you mean.
Yeah.
The people within that group, within that identity group, are also manipulated by the weaponization of identity by people in positions of power to get even more of what they want.
In fact, they're the most manipulated within their own group.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
So for example, come back to the economy. So I tell you guys, you see higher gas prices, Israel did that too. There's no question, that's empirical.
Yep.
We would not have gone into this war. We have almost no American interest in it. So you know that, right? But what a lot of Jewish Americans hear is, Jews did that to you, you should hate Jews. And so I'm super worried about this guy. It's like, why do they hear it wrong, right? And they're empirically wrong. So when I say the Turkish government did something to you, like taking northern Syria, I certainly don't mean all Turks, I didn't do it, right? And Turks generally get it because they have a government, they've had a government for a long time, and the government has done a lot of wrong things for a long time, right? So, et cetera. But what I'm trying to get Jewish Americans to understand is we're not saying Jews. Your leaders are manipulating you to think we're saying Jews. We got no issues with you at all. Our issues is with the government of Israel that is doing these malicious and terrible things. And is it because of them and the war that they started that our gas prices are higher? Yes, it's not your fault, brother. You didn't do it, right? But they did, and they view it we've all been brainwashed, guys. I got brainwashed by Turkish propaganda. That's why I didn't believe in the Armenian genocide for so long. So I've been there, okay, to Douglas Murray for the first time. I've been there, okay?
Have you been?
Yeah, so I understand that mentality really, really well, right? But what I want to tell my fellow Turks, my fellow Jewish Americans, et cetera, not my fellow, but is that, guys, nobody's attacking you. We're just talking about what governments do, and governments have done terrible things, including, yes, the Israeli government. They're not some special magical government that can't ever do anything wrong, let alone the things they're actually massively doing wrong. So don't take it in a personal way. And the good news is, again, I keep repeating this stat because it's so important, and it's part of the manipulation of the media that they never state this stat, right? Yep. That 63% of Jewish Americans are against the current Israeli government, okay? So the reason why mainstream media doesn't repeat that stat is because they want to have the excuse of being able to call Israel's critics anti-Semites.
And later in the show, we've got a story about that, so.
Yeah. So you see how the media is manipulating not just all Americans, but particularly Jewish Americans. You should be afraid. They're insulting you. All in an effort not to protect Jewish Americans who are against the Israeli government, but in an attempt to protect the Israeli government. And that's why I say mainstream media and our politicians serve that government, and it's really sick the way that they do. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.